Hi everyone. Welcome back to Cosmic Curiosity with A&E. My name is Eileen, and on the other end I have my lovely co-host.
Ariana. Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Yes, welcome back indeed. It's nice to be back here. We did take a break last week and we apologize. Again, life happens, and I hope you guys can forgive us for our lack. Speaking of forgiveness, this week we're talking about forgiveness. So,
Yes.
what does that mean? Is it like an apology? Is it making amends? What does it mean to you? Well, let's see. The definition of forgive is releasing feelings of anger or resentment towards someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. What do you think about that, Ariana?
Yeah, I think it definitely goes into feeling. Also, I think when we forgive, it's not about forgetting, because then we can lose the lesson. But
Hmm.
when we forgive, I think it's more so for ourselves, not for anyone else. I think there's a lot of misconceptions on what forgiveness is. I think people tend to mistake it for apologizing or even for condoning behavior. When we say
Yes.
it's time to forgive that person who offended you, who hit you, who talked to you in a certain manner, who made some kind of offense or aggression towards you, and people automatically tense up and I'm not going to forgive.
Oh, yeah, totally. People are against it for sure. However, like one of the things that I'm seeing here in this definition is releasing anger or resentment towards an offense, a flaw. That flaw word is calling to me.
Oh,
'Cause
wow.
it's like, damn, and you don't realize that you start to hate on people because they're flawed. And it's like you look at somebody and they could just their actions or the way that they speak or the way that they express themselves is a flaw to you and they just annoy the fuck out of you. And then all of a sudden you're angry for like nothing.
Oh my gosh. Somebody has been very childish in their communication with me, according to me. And that's a flaw. I was like, you know what? What are some character flaws? Let me just type it up in here. Being arrogant, addicted, abusive, greedy, perfectionism, aimless, anxiety, alcoholic, cruel, hypocritical, impulsivity is a flaw. Okay, yeah. Indecisiveness, being afraid, bad habits, callous, belittling, competitive. Oh my God, the list goes on. Controlling.
Yeah. Controlling? Dude, that's like the majority of the population, especially
Yeah,
when they're fearful. Yeah. The
I
more
never
controlling
I
someone
never
out.
think about flaws. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, well, we're probably out here fucking being mad at people just because they're not perfect.
What are you talking about? I'm perfect in God's eyes. Yeah, you're
Perfectly
absolutely right.
imperfect. We're
You're
perfectly imperfect.
you're absolutely right. And we're
Yes.
sitting here and the resentment. So a lot of people, the way that resentment was even explained to me, it's you have this feeling and then you let it go. But the moment that you see someone, all of a sudden you're feeling the same thing. So you're resented, like you're feeling the sentiment of that
Mm.
again. So it's happening again.
Imagine somebody that has a stutter, and every time that you see them, you're like, "Oh, I don't wanna talk to them because they talk like this," you know, and then you and then all of a sudden they're like, "I hate this person because they talk like this." Not trying to make fun of anyone that has a stutter, it's just like, it's not their fault.
Is not their fault.
So, forgiveness. We're talking about forgiveness and having people be angry at us or us being angry at others because of their flaws. Offenses too. Why do you think we get offended? Somebody can say anything and all of a sudden have a trigger with it and then be like, "Oh, I don't like this person because they said this."
I think I think we get offended because we take it personal and something within us is being triggered because we can identify with it.
Yeah, I agree. And then making a mistake. I think making a mistake is natural. Everyone does it. But I was reading the book of, what is it, the 48 Laws of Power, and section in the book that expressed how admitting to a mistake is a loss in power, because history shows that even kings and people leading armies have had moments in their lives where they were unprepared and they made a mistake and they didn't have enough food to feed everyone. And so they've gone through like, oh, investigating if people are trying to overthrow that king or that person. And then they'll be like, oh, they'll go out of their way to find someone to pin the mistake on. And so that they kill that person and relieve the community of angry people from the feelings of resentment towards the king. And then that way they're still in power. It's crazy. Is that the right thing to do? Like, no, fuck no, I don't think so. But is there a better way to go about it and to, choose how to reobtain your power? I think so. I think for me it speaks of magnitude of someone when they're able to accept responsibility or be accountable and attempt to look for solutions instead of like being like, "Oh, well, it's their fault."
Blame the victim.
And blame the victim. Yeah, how many innocent people have lost their jobs or lost their lives or lost something because they were just simply the easy target? Forgiveness. We're going to talk about, what does forgiveness do for the self? What are the benefits that it provides us? Ariana, do you want to talk about that?
There is emotional healing. The reduction of like negative emotions can lead into improved health. So I think we have talked about The Body Keeps the Score, one of the books, and it talks about how when we have stuck emotions, one of them being unforgiveness, it gets stuck in our body. And oftentimes you'll hear resentment gets stored in the heart area, and people will have heart and blood circulation issues. When you allow yourself that release or that allowance of, you're no longer going to hold yourself hostage while the other person lives their life like nothing, it allows you to relieve yourself of an internal prison that you essentially have built for yourself.
Yeah. And that's all based off of your own perception, right? Your own interpretation of the events that happened. Something that I've noticed with something that I've noticed with people that have still had those anger and resentment feelings is that they haven't taken the step to fully embrace that emotion and therefore allow it to just come out and to accept it and to, even to, if there's something that like that happens and it's something worth forgiving as well as apologizing for, or you can obtain clarity by discussing it with the person, like 9 times out of 10 people won't do it.
I think a lot of us aren't taught how to forgive or how to apologize. I know in my
Yeah.
household, both my parents are Capricorns. You think any of them were going to apologize? Yeah, right. Or their apologize look like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
that that one where they just throw it back at you.
Mhm. So I think a lot of it has to do with us not knowing because we weren't given examples. Because I can tell you, growing up Catholic, it was por mi culpa, you know? And then they're like, ask for forgiveness, and they drill forgiveness down your throat, but they never actually taught me how. How do you do this
Yeah.
thing that they are just putting into our minds as children, and they don't actually really give you an example or how? They may say you let go or you forgive but don't forget, but do they ever really teach us? It's not until I was an adult going through therapy and courses and allowing myself to take events to my highest point of pain and allow myself to let go of it. But there was a process, there was something that was taught and given to me, there were tools that were shown to us on how to forgive. But I really think a lot of people just don't know how.
Yeah, I agree. It took me a long time to really even just dive in my own emotions and realize that I was upset for all of the wrong that I felt was done to me. And some of the things that I noticed in my family were like, well, I'm not going to talk to them until they apologize to me. But then what do they need to apologize to you for if they don't even know, like, you haven't communicated what is the issue? Because this person thinks one thing and then that person thinks the other thing. And it's like, how do you meet in the middle to apologize to somebody for something that you guys aren't even open to discuss? And, going into the concept of closure, we want that apology because we're like, oh, well, this will close the loop and then I'll feel better. But that's not always the case. Like, you can have someone apologize to you and be like, oh, like you just said, I'm sorry you feel that way. And then it's like the
I'm
shittiest
sorry you
feeling
took it personal.
ever. Because then all of a sudden you walked away and you've just been gaslighted the fuck out of. And then you're like, wait a minute. I felt this way. I walked into this conversation really confident in the way that I felt. And now I don't even know what the fuck happened. Have you had those moments?
I've had a lot of those moments. And I had to get a point in my own process too, with depending on what I was forgiving, realizing that getting an apology from someone, again, it's not the same as forgiveness, is isn't or wasn't going to give me the closure that I really desired, because closure is often also mistaken with, I'm going to admit what I did, I'm going to recognize what I did, and somehow we're going to feel better as the offender or as the offended, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is one of those things. You get to integrate the parts of what you learned in your lesson. What did you learn from whatever offense? The way that I do forgiveness is I I write it out. That way my thoughts aren't interrupted. I say everything that I need to say, get it off my chest. And then I pull from that. And, if you yelled at me and told me what to do for so long, I didn't like it. It made me feel blah, 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 blah. And then I'll go back, look at it, and be like, oh, but I learned what I learned from you yelling at me is that I could have used my voice and said no, or I could have gave you the hand, or there are so many things that you can pull from when you write things out.
And just taking it back to those common misconceptions of forgiveness, I know that you mentioned a few of them earlier, which is like condoning the behavior. Things that we're talking about now is the apology, which comes with reconciliation. Reconciliation isn't always necessary and isn't always the healthy route. And that's what I love about forgiveness, is that you don't have
You don't need the other
to.
person.
Exactly. In order to have an apology, you need the other person. But in the process of forgiveness, you don't. You don't need them at all. I know that it doesn't condone the behavior, because if you need to go through the process of forgiveness, it's a way that you're teaching yourself and you're acknowledging to yourself that this is not okay. And you're like, how else would you know that it's not okay if you had not gone through it? Now you're aware of this is not okay, and now you have the ability to set new boundaries and make sure that you don't go through that again, and be able to look for other ways to proceed without you having to expose yourself to the same hurt. And then choosing to get out of victim mode is a great strange strength. It takes courage, and that is what forgiveness provides for you. So those people that see it as a sign of weakness, in my opinion, they're actually fearful of the process of going through and opening that can of worms to really feel out what's happening inside of them. And, somebody that can do that, that will do that, they've taken this step to face their demons with courage. It's not a one-time event. This is a continued process, especially when you have had years and years of hurt. Possibly this is very common with family, because those are oftentimes the ones that will keep overstepping boundaries, and the ones that overstep boundaries the easiest because they know you and they know how to push your buttons. So, and they also know that they can get away with it. And it's becomes more difficult or more challenging on the person in that family, because now you're like, oh, well, I grew up like this, and you have decades of the same pattern, and now you're having to bring it back together and be like, no, this is not okay. And I need to find a way to proceed with this in a different way so that it's not repeated. Even if they are my family, even if they are my childhood friends, even if they are my teachers, my mentors, whatever, your bosses, whatever you're going through, like, it's an internal process for sure. Some of the things that we expect, well, the main thing that we expect from the forgiveness process is apologies. And when you're sitting there through your forgiveness process expecting anything, that's the first sign of failure. That's the first sign of failure, because you're not going inside. You're still picking up the exterior part of the problem, which is not the original source of the problem. Ariana, can you go into the difference of apologies and forgiveness?
So you already covered the part where with an apology, you need the other party. With forgiveness, you don't. This is why we can forgive people who aren't even alive anymore. We can forgive people who aren't in our life anymore. With an apology, where it's an expression of regret and it's an acknowledgement of the wrongdoing. So when we want someone to apologize, we want them to face their wrongdoing. Not only that, but then there's the allowance of you can make amends with them. They can actually change their behavior or say, how can I make this up to you? And it involves action. And this is when we want to continue a relationship with someone who has offended us. It requires action, but there's an expression of remorse, of regret. They take accountability for what they did, and then they correct the wrongdoing. That's an apology. You will always need a secondary person for that to happen. The cool thing about forgiveness is that you don't have to make amends with those that you forgive. You don't have to continue a relationship with the person that offended you. When you're sitting in unforgiveness, it's like, I'm drinking this poison so you can die. It's you putting the poison down and realizing, oh my gosh, I'm poisoning myself. You achieve a personal peace within with forgiveness. It's an emotional healing. You free yourself of the burden of the negative emotions and free yourself of the story you keep telling yourself. Because once you get to the level of forgiveness where you can actually acknowledge the hurt and the impact it caused on your life, accept the circumstances, you can then move forward and say, but this is what this taught me. This is what I learned. It's so different where an apology has nothing to do with that. And you can let go of those negative emotions, that anger, that resentment, and you can find that peace within when it's forgiveness. It's about finding that peace within and no longer holding that other person hostage in your own mind, in your own prison.
That's big. Not holding yourself in that prison is huge. And like it's so funny because I'll see people, and it's mainly within family, within the older generation, where they're like, I won't talk to so and so because they did this like 20 plus years ago. And then I'll find something
So big
like,
in our culture. So it's
it's
so big.
so big, and it's so crazy because I found, like, I have gone back and, like, cleaned out, family areas or, like, documents or shit like that, where I have found, like, the thread of the problem, and it's like, this is nothing. This is no, like, it was clearly a misunderstanding, and all
Or you
that's
can
all that
ask them,
it
hey,
was.
why do you and so don't talk? I don't even remember, but I just remember I'm mad at them.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember what book I read this in, or I don't know if it was like my psychology thing, but every time you bring up a memory, it is altered. So every
Yes.
time you access your memory files and every time you remember a certain memory, you alter the memory now based off of the emotional state, physical state, and the senses that you're experiencing at the time that you access that memory. So
because
you're
yeah,
creating your own story.
100%.
100%.
So we'll use this as an example because we're going to talk about have we ever felt that someone owes us an apology, right?
Yes.
So I felt that my dad has owed not only myself an apology, but my entire family, my mother, my brother, my niece, everyone, for what I feel he put us through, right? And right now that I'm in a good mood and going back into that memory and we're talking about forgiveness, I don't feel the same way about it. I literally legit do not feel the same way about it right now, speaking about it in this moment, because I'm in a good mood. Had we done this podcast when I was in a shitty mood, oh, y'all would have heard the victim ass story. But there was for a really long time, I also felt like my ex owed me an apology or that I also owed apologies, right?
I
Because
felt
there's a,
that.
because I feel like, I don't want this relationship to end this way. Let me make sure they know where I stood or how or why, because apologies are also a chance for you to explain yourself, even though that's not what we're trying to do.
No, but oftentimes I have found myself feeling offended and me being like, you know what, I'm gonna apologize and I'm gonna take the blame just to open up the discussion. And then it's like totally backfired. Like, I shouldn't have done that. At the end, I feel like it just pissed me off even more. Like, we couldn't even come to a conversation. It was almost like they were offended that I would even feel offended or that they even needed to apologize. And it's like, first of all, if you like, that's a red flag now to me. Like, before I used to be like, oh my God, I'm imperfect. It's all me, because that's all I was
I
really,
ask people if they know how to apologize. I legit ask men I'm interested in, hey, do you know what an apology consists of?
yeah.
Before they even offend me, before I get offended or take anything personal, it just kind of shows me where they're at also on an emotional scale or on an emotional level is do they have the tools or the capacity to apologize? In case I
Hmm.
say at some point, hey, your detachment really hurt my feelings. You not calling me for a week or 2 weeks, like it caused a rift in our relationship. And then we wait to see what happens, right? But the majority of the time, we're waiting for some kind of closure or some kind of acknowledgement, right? How do you decide when you want to forgive somebody?
Well, back to what I was saying before is that
Sorry.
I used to feel like I needed to be the one that was always reaching out to the other individual to make the effort to be like, hey, I'm here. I want to continue this. I want to make this better. And I would take the blame and be like, whatever, I don't give a fuck. Like, let's just make it better. But because I would do that, it was never fully let go of because I still didn't get my own satisfaction, which
The
was giving
reciprocity, the expectation.
exactly. Not
Don't
even
they
the
call it,
expectation.
we're
No,
calling that
not
being
even
the bigger person when you
not
go off
even
and
that.
you apologize first?
No, not even that. What I'm trying to say is I wouldn't give myself because I wanted to fix it with that person. I didn't go internally to fix it with me first. To be like, no, Eileen, this isn't right. And so you need to set that difference aside and be decisive on what action you want to take for you, not for them. And that's where realized, like, oh, I don't need to be reaching out to people that did me wrong or that I felt like did me wrong. And that's when I started letting go of that, oh, they need to call me and tell me, or I'm going to wait for them to do this or this and that. Like, I started going internal and living it, feeling it, expressing it with myself, meditating on it, like doing all of these different practices so that I really understood why I was triggered and not be like, and then in that process, it's, you know, that surrender that I've experienced has placed certain individuals in my life or me in that circumstance where I can be like, "Oh, this is the moment. Like, this is where we talk about it." And there's nothing that's forced. There's nothing that is like that is not authentic because I didn't ask for it. Like there's been relationships that I've had even with family members where I've seen them and we hadn't talked for years and then all of a sudden we're in a space where we can open up about a conflict that we had or even with friends. And I'm like, "Oh, wow, like now I can talk about it at a level-minded with the level-minded perception and feel a resolve instead of feeling like there's blame." Does that make sense?
Yes, to a certain degree. I guess because you're not giving like a specific example, I'm trying to like, yeah, I get it. However, but when do you decide? Like, when is it time? When do you decide that it's time to make amends or forgive someone?
I don't. It just happens. So that's what I'm saying is like before I used to be like for example, with my baby's dad, I used to be like, "It's your fault," like, or "Let's talk about it," or we would get upset and they'd be like, "Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's fix it." And then we're discussing an issue, placing blame on our actions or the things that we don't like about each other, the things that are annoying us, and then we don't get anywhere. Where then when I started to separate the connection with him and just really be like, "Eileen, what are you going through? Like, what's really bothering you?" And we've had our moments where the kids did something, brought us together, and we talked about an issue that happened years ago that now we're able to resolve. And it's not something that's expected. It's like, "Oh, I've already felt this. I've already been here. I already know what my pattern is. I recognize this pattern of his in our from our past, and I can choose to see a different direction."
I think I decide to forgive once it's weighing me down, once it's all I'm ruminating about, once it's impacted my mood to such a degree where that's what I'm thinking about. Like, he should call me. Why isn't he calling me? Why is there no communication? Why did this person do this? Why is my brother acting this way? Why do I feel tension? Why? So once it gets to a point where I'm ruminating over something, is when I finally decide, all right, it's time to stop drinking this poison. It's time to stop pointing the finger at them, waiting for some kind of resolve when forgiveness is all of the resolve that I need for myself.
Mhm. Well, I guess what I thought you were saying is when do I resolve it with the person? And that's when I say, first I forgive it within myself. I go internally and I let go of that poison first. And when the resolve comes with the other individual, it's so much easier to resolve
When it can be resolved.
when it can be resolved. I mean, there's times where there's just no point. There's people that do shitty things, and I wouldn't even open up that can of worms anyway. But especially with family or loved ones, like I don't really want to end those relationships, with good friends, unless there's like a really, really fucked up thing that happened and, you know, if there's a way to resolve it, I would totally.
I mean, I think the biggest thing with forgiveness is that there is no expectation. The thing with apologies, there is an expectation. You're waiting for something, or you're waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. With forgiveness, I think because it doesn't involve anyone else, the only expectations that you have are your own towards yourself and towards the way you're going to feel about it, right? Versus an apology, there has to be that two-way communication. So,
Yeah,
what are some of the techniques or practices that you use?
I meditate on it. I'll write it out. I've definitely dabbled in psychedelics to really see what's going on because there's been times where I just didn't even know why I was feeling a way that I was feeling, and then I took a dose of mushrooms or I did a ayahuasca trip where it's been like, this is everything you've been holding on to, and it's not for everyone. Not I That's something that I only recommend for those who are ready for that kind of healing or to see that. But in meditation too, it's brought me so much more peace. The Four Agreements, I know we've mentioned this book so many times within our podcast, but it's huge on the forgiveness part with me, especially because it's that don't take things personal and don't make assumptions. A lot of the issues that I've noticed I found myself in are from people making assumptions about me and me making assumptions about them. And so when I can go back and remember the four agreements and live by them and be like, hey, like, dude, chill, rewind, come back to these four agreements, and then like write this shit out. Like, what's going on? Why do you feel this way? And sometimes, like, I've noticed I'll feel bothered about something that really has nothing to do with that person. Like, they just care, they just had like, it's a
They
trigger,
were just
right?
a
They just
mirror and a trigger to something that you needed to heal, 100%.
Yeah, and so then it's going back. That's where I'll do the meditations. I'll go back and be like, okay, this is a trigger. I'll acknowledge that this is a trigger. So that trigger is the problem. Where did that problem originate? Sometimes I'll see it in my dreams. I'll document my dreams. I'll write affirmations. I've done even meditations on like jealousy, on envy, on, you know, just allowing myself to feel those lower frequency emotions so that I can understand what it's about inside of me.
One thing that I go over with my clients is the types of forgiveness that there are. People think, oh, forgiveness is forgiveness, but I was taught by one of the shamans that I did an ayahuasca trip with is that there's four types of forgiveness. There's the ego or mental based, which is very out of sight, out of mind. I don't see you, I forget you exist. So it's very superficial and it avoids conflict. It's very passive aggressive a lot. I'll tolerate you because we live in the same household or because we're in the same family and I run into you on occasion. But then it's like, but I hope you choke on a piece of bread.
Yeah.
What makes you right and them wrong? There's no
Well,
peace
that's
with it. There is
actually one of
no
the that's one of the so as you're saying that, that's one of the meditations I did was on that jealousy, where the chick was talking about like, I want them and this and this and this to go this way, but not them because they got promoted before I did, or not them because they talked to me this way when they shouldn't be talking to me this way. That's the same, very similar. So it does house from that, like, from
it's
that
ego.
envious part,
It's
the ego,
ego
yeah.
mental based. Yeah.
Hmm.
So then the second type of forgiveness is responsibility based, right? I understand you had your part and I had mine. We can move past it because we both agree to move forward and go our separate ways. I don't care what happens to you, or I care because you're still in my life. So this one allows us, it's kind of like what you had mentioned earlier with your ex, right? It allows us to move forward to a certain extent, but this type of forgiveness where I did my part, you did yours, can result in a lot of resentment. And it can be very robotic and you can suppress a lot of crap that later turns into dis-ease in your body. I'll give you an example. You'll hear about something that happens to that person, something bad, and you'll be like, ha, that's what they get for treating me like blah, 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 blah. Or
Karma.
karma. Does that sound like it's so familiar? So there really are different types of forgiveness. And that is responsibility based. Oh, what comes around goes around. And then we have the heart based. So the heart based forgiveness is what I teach with my clients in the forgiveness letters. And this one is you come to terms that everybody had their role. We each had our doing, and you did your thing, I did mine. I felt the way I did. I don't know about your feelings because I'm not in your head. But this is when you can find the blessing in the situation where you don't condone what was done, and where you can receive the valuable lessons and move on with your life, where you don't wish them harm or you don't wish them anything. Sometimes you even get to a neutrality with this person. Okay. This is the one that I practice the most because with my dad and what he did, I have to forgive this man on a daily basis. And it's so interesting that I got to have him for Father's Day, and I took him to Denny's, and he was just talking, and I was just sitting there looking at him like, I cannot believe I'm just like cool with this man, knowing what he did to our family, knowing how he hurt me, how he hurt my niece, how he hurt a lot of all of us. And then I sit here and I'm like, but oh my gosh, I learned so much through this process that I sit there and I check myself. And I'm just like, this is why. Because if he wouldn't have done these things, I wouldn't have learned this.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest things that what happened with my father is that he taught me what true unconditional love is that even though that you're a criminal, and sometimes that anger comes up and you're a fucking asshole. But then I'm just like, wait, you taught me what an unconditional love feels like. Because even though you did those things, I'm not proud of what you did, but I can still love you through it. I can still go and have a good time with you and laugh and move forward.
Yeah.
And
And you
but
know
it
what is crazy?
requires such an awareness, and it requires willingness. Forgiveness requires willingness. And that's what many people just aren't willing to do. And then the last type of forgiveness, I'll just go really quick into it, is divine forgiveness. Is realizing that there's nothing to forgive, that everything has a divine purpose, and this will go where you want it to go. But it's the hardest for our minds to comprehend because it's very godlike. It requires time, practice, inner understanding, just on another level. But this is overstanding that there's nothing to forgive. Like that person who cut you off, like, oh, well, there's some reason for that. It doesn't even phase you. It'll cross your mind and
It's
it leaves
like
your body immediately.
Archangel Gabriel on Lucifer, how he's like putting all of these little things into place so that like there's unfortunate misfortune that happens here to make this happen over there. And then it's just like a little piece of the puzzle. It's all falling into place just like domino. So I have done the forgiveness letter that you give your clients. I've been a client of yours. And one thing I recently noticed, because I've done it like for everyone in my family, and the one that
Say that.
you have to. I mean, come on. It's all of these years of built up shit.
There are layers. So another thing that I want to address is when we forgive, it's not going to be done with one letter or one
No,
conversation. There's
no.
layers. It's like an onion, pull it from Shrek. It's like an onion. There's layers to the hurt.
Yeah. So back to what I was saying is that I considered like I've let my anger out and put it on paper and did like the lesson and all of this shit. But the one that changed everything for me, like with my dad, was I let that shit out so hard. Like I think I cursed most of the letter. I fucking went so deep into the anger that at the end, I wasn't even blaming him, but I was forgiving myself for wanting a father to treat me like a little girl should be treated, or like I was saying shit like this to me, like the simplest things, where now I like it was me forgiving my it took me to forgive myself for my own expectations on my dad, to be like, oh. And then after that I was just like, oh, I wrote all that shit, like dang, I was angry.
So one of the amazing things that happens with these letters, because I have all my clients burn them, I've done several of them too. The amount of emotion that you put into these letters, and when you burn them, sometimes they'll go up in flames quick.
Yeah.
I have had clients time their letters 15, 20, 30 minutes with 2 pages. But they put so much emotion in it that it's a slow burn, that they will watch it and it won't go up in flames immediately because there's so much emotion in that it's transmuting the energy. This is why these forgiveness letters work. Another
Mhm.
thing that happened, just a personal experience with forgiveness, is one of the biggest things that I was telling my dad in one of my letters was, I wish you were just honest. And I wish you would communicate with me more often. And these are patterns I have with men: communication and honesty. It was in October when I had just changed my legal name to Ariana. By Christmas Eve of that same year, I get a call from my dad. It shows up as my mom's number, but my mom's next to me. So I was like, hey, look, you're calling me. And it's my dad. And he's like, Mija, I'm just calling to wish you a Merry Christmas. And I was like, what? He's calling me? And this is after I did one of these forgiveness letters. And he's like, and I before I let you go, I just kind of want to tell you that I'm not happy that you changed your name. What? So I'm getting the communication and the honesty that I requested, because you are allowed to make requests in your letters.
Yeah.
You're allowed to kill them in your letters. You're allowed to do whatever. Just get it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got 2 of those things back. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen with everybody, but because I still have a relationship with him, ever since then, it's easier. And I got something out of it that I was like, these forgiveness letters are trippy. Now, I'm not saying that if you go off and you forgive your ex, they're going to contact you, nothing like that. But this just so happened because it was with my dad and I was open to that communication. And I really do believe that that happened because of the request that I made in my letter, because
Well,
it takes it.
I've also had like forgiveness letters written to exes where they have, especially during Mercury retrograde, reached out to me and then I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Wait a minute.
Triggered.
This is sounds familiar." But it's like it's so true. Like I think regardless of whether you're open or closed to the communication with them, the message gets received some way or another.
Energetically, it is an
Energetically.
energetically, because because I didn't tell him any of this. I did one
Yeah.
to my brother. I've done them to the exes. One of my exes, he legit called me years later, and he's like, I just thought of you because this happened in front of me, and I just wanted to call and apologize. So
Mhm.
forgiveness sometimes leads to apologies, where
Yeah,
you
well, that's what I'm
open
saying.
out and let go, where now you are open to that person communicating with you and accepting their wrongdoing. And then that's the most beautiful thing. But is it necessary? No.
Yeah. Well, that's where I think the resolve comes in, where I gave that story with my ex, that there's that internal like acceptance or feelings of peace and harmony, and then the resolve with the other person comes about, and then you're like, oh, this is the place, this is the time, this is, I recognize this.
Mhm.
Or will they'll like call you. I've had a call from like an ex where they've called me and been like, dude, I think you were right, I did this and that, and I think I failed here. And I'm just like, tell me more. like I just said hello.
It, I really do believe forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools and one of the most powerful things that we can do as souls in this human ass body, feeling these human emotions, that we are supposed to feel all of these things. We're not just supposed to feel the good ones. We were put in
Mhm.
this body to feel the not so great ones either. But when you can get to that level, like that godlike level where there's nothing to forgive. I mean, the divine forgiveness is a whole different level, because also you can't go around hurting people and thinking, oh, well, I just played my role. No, I just want to put that out there. But when you can get to that level of, oh my gosh, I owe them. Oh my gosh, I really need to forgive myself for what I did, but I owe them an apology. And you get to that. It's kind of like what you shared earlier, where you're no longer going to be the one to reach out, reach out, reach out. It's just going to happen. it I think that's the most beautiful thing.
It is. It so is. Like you said, the divine thing, you have to go through all of the stages of forgiveness, through the selfish forgiveness, through the
The ego
blames. It like,
of
I
your
forgive you,
friend.
but I don't want to see your face for the next lifetime, or you know what I mean? Like all of those little petty things, we have
You
to go
gotta
through
go.
that.
Yes. Yes.
We have to go through that in order to get to the divine. So that's that I think that when somebody is now open to the process of forgiveness, it's okay to be like, all right, this is how I'm feeling a little petty right now. And then the next stage would be like acceptance and like, oh, if I see them, it's whatever. Like it doesn't bother you. It's so clear to me when I know that it's it's a healing where I can be accused or talked to, or like even I got a message today earlier from someone that I haven't spoke to since 2022. And there was so many accusations about me being a drug addict and being like going and getting loaded with some friends from a tattoo shop, and like there was so much assumption in this message, and I have not spoken to this person since 2022, and the last conversations that we had was her talking about a little boy and with racist ass comments and me calling it out. So now all of a sudden 2 years later this girl hits me up with the same issue.
She was probably
and
scrolling
I'm
through her old messages. Said, "Oh, here's
and
a side open pic."
And then when I saw it, I was just like, wow, like it's so crazy because I also haven't seen her in 2 years. So the fact that she even knew that I had friends at a tattoo shop and things, she's either stalking me or she's talking to people about me. And it's the best feeling was that I was like, whatever about it. And I responded, I said what I needed to say. She didn't respond back. But it's not something that I'm like, that I feel is my fault.
Fault right here is completely removed. Well, maybe not completely. You can fault someone all you want, but there's no room for it.
Yeah.
There really is no room for it.
You It's like when you're trying to insult someone. Like if you like I'm skinny and short, like you can't call me fat and tall to insult me. You know what I mean? And this is literally what this girl was doing. She was saying things that are so outside of the
You didn't
truth
identify with any of them.
that I
Yeah.
can't identify with it, so I can't even, like, subconsciously or consciously connect to it, and that's the best part. When you're doing the forgiveness process, you are letting go of those subconscious, triggers as well, and so when somebody does come up to you and tries to insult you or tries to attack you because they're feeling a certain way about themselves, then you can be like, "Nah, that's not for me. I'm not fat and tall. What you talking about? I'm skinny and short."
Yeah. So just to recap some of the differences between an apology and forgiveness. So we have the initiator. During an apology, it's the person who did the wrongdoing. And then during forgiveness, it's initiated by the person who was wrong. Apologies focus on the wrongdoer expressing remorse and taking accountability and seeking to make amends, versus forgiveness is an emotional release to get to a sense of peace for being wronged. The outcome and the outcome of both. So, an apology is going to rectify and possibly reignite the relationship, where forgiveness seeks to restore the emotional peace, and you don't have to go back into a relationship with anybody you forgive. You do not have to. You do not have to communicate with them. You can love them at a distance if you choose to love them, or hate them at a distance. You want to have that peace, so there probably won't be that hate if you really do it the right way. Understanding these differences is major and huge. So maybe some of you guys get triggered to forgive that person that you're ruminating on, or that, little girl in third grade who stole your binder.
Thank you for tuning in. to this episode. Ariana, you have any final words?
Yeah, look up the book Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. It's not the first time we recommend it. The Four Agreements is also a great one that can lead you into forgiveness. I have the process that is I'm always willing to share. If any of you want the process, please reach out to us and we'll forward it to you. So thanks everyone for being a part of this conversation, and happy forgiving.
Happy forgiving. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.